Caleb had only meant to ask one question. Just one, simple, rhetorical question. But when the courtroom went silent, something else answered. It wasn't the girl. It wasn't the jury. It wasn't even the judge himself, who now sat unnaturally still, his fingers curling slightly around the gavel as if it weighed more than the truth. The air in the room didn't shift. The lights didn't flicker. But everyone felt it. A presence. Like the entire courthouse had just stepped 1 inch outside of time. Caleb blinked. The girl across from him, no older than 17 maybe, 18, was staring straight ahead, her dark eyes unblinking, her lips parted just enough to show the breath had left her. She hadn't moved. And yet, her voice filled the room, or something that sounded like her voice. "Do you know the, cost of a lie told under oath?" No one else reacted. Not the stenographer. Not the balding man on the jury who'd been nervously scribbling notes for the past hour. Not even the bailiff, whose foot had been tapping the whole trial and now hung suspended midair. It was as if only you had heard it, and you're not sure why. Why this case, why this girl, why now? But something inside you says you've just stumbled across a sealed vault, and the combination wasn't supposed to work. You're not supposed to be here, yet here you are. The girl's name was Alani Reese, straight A student, debate team president, raised in a rough part of Baltimore, fought her way through system after system that failed her, abandoned her, labeled her as trouble before she even had a chance to speak. But the moment she walked into this courtroom, defending herself, no lawyer, no script, everyone thought it was a mistake. Everyone except the judge. Judge Nathaniel Crow. A man who didn't like being surprised. A man whose reputation was built on one thing: breaking people. Not with anger, not with yelling, but with quiet questions. He called it his truth or lie game. Ask the wrong question, reveal the wrong emotion, and he'd unravel you like thread. But Alani didn't unravel. She listened. She watched. She waited. And when she finally spoke, it didn't feel like a defense. It felt like a test, like she was letting him play his game, waiting for something no one else knew was coming. And when it came, when that voice rang out, when everything stopped, you noticed something even the cameras missed. The judge flinched, not a blink, not a twitch, a flinch. A man who had presided over 10,000 cases. A man who once claimed, on live television, that no truth scares me more than silence. And yet here he was, shrinking back into his robes like they could protect him. Why? What had he seen? What had he heard? Because here's the part no one will believe. As the silence dragged on, and the courtroom began to buzz again, like whatever that was had passed, one of the court officers stepped forward, leaned toward the judge to whisper something into his ear. No one paid much attention, just a procedural update. But you heard it somehow, not with your ears, with something deeper. The officer didn't say anything ordinary. He didn't mention a recess or a case file or evidence. He said, "She knows." And then he vanished. Gone. Mid-step, no smoke, no scream, just no longer there. The cameras blinked, the lights dimmed. The footage shows him walking out like nothing happened, but you know better. You felt it, and Alani. She smiled, just barely, a flicker, as if she'd been waiting for this moment all her life. What happens next isn't in any file, not in any court record. Not even the people who were there remember it clearly. But you will, because you saw it. And you haven't even heard what the judge asked her right before reality cracked. He said, "Did you speak to him? The man in cell 6? And Alani said nothing, but something behind her eyes did. Cell 6 has been sealed for 19 years, and the man in it died in 2006. So the question is no longer who Alani is, it's what she's waiting for. And you've already heard the first whisper. Are you ready for the next? The courtroom had emptied in minutes, but the silence didn't leave. It lingered, like a low, vibrating hum just beyond the edge of hearing, something too subtle to catch but impossible to ignore. You can almost feel the air thickening, folding over itself, like time had been sliced open and left bleeding. Caleb, the judge, Alani, they're all gone now, vanished into the blur of what should have happened. But the echo remains, scratching at your mind like a truth no one wants you to uncover. Because here's the thing, what you just witnessed might never have been real. Or maybe it's real in a way that's far more dangerous, far more terrifying than you're prepared to accept. See, after that night, after the footage went dark and the courthouse was swept clean of any hint that something unexplainable had occurred, the memories started slipping. Not for everyone, only for those who had seen it. For some, the day of the trial is a clear, mundane record. For others, well, the line between what actually happened and what they think happened begins to crumble. Caleb couldn't remember leaving the courthouse. Judge Crow called in sick the next day, citing exhaustion, but a small circle whispered about something worse. Visions, whispers behind closed doors, and phone calls that cut to static. And Alani? She disappeared. No trace, no forwarding address, no digital footprint beyond that one chilling moment. You want to trust what you saw, but then you find the recordings. Not official. They're grainy, cracked cell phone videos taken by someone who was there, but barely paying attention. The audio cuts out mid-sentence. The girl's voice wavers, sometimes clear, sometimes distorted into a robotic echo that can't belong to any human. The judge's face glitches in and out of focus like a corrupted file. And the most unnerving part, the whispered words nobody else heard, the ones you know you caught, they're nowhere on these recordings. It's like the universe is daring you to forget, to dismiss it as a hallucination, a mental breakdown, or a hoax. You check your own memory, try to hold it steady, but fragments begin to fall away. You blink and suddenly you're not sure if you heard the officer vanish, or if your mind stitched that piece in from somewhere else. A dream, maybe. And then, there's Rosa. Rosa shows up a week after everything falls apart, like she was drawn in by the same invisible thread you feel tugging inside your brain. She says she's a reporter, claims she's chasing a real unsolved mystery about Alani, Reese and the sealed cell, about the judge who lost control in a court of law. But her eyes don't quite meet yours, and there's a hollow edge to her voice that feels like it's hiding more than it reveals. She pulls you aside in a dim coffee shop, the kind where the light flickers just enough to make shadows look like they're alive. She says things like, they don't want you to remember, and the truth behind what no one tells you is always buried beneath layers of silence. Her stories shift and fold in on themselves. 1 minute, she swears she has documents proving Alani's existence was erased by some shadowy agency. The next, she admits she can't find any records at all, like the girl was a ghost from the start. You want to trust Rosa because she's the only other person who seems to remember the fractures, but every now and then she vanishes for days. Unreachable, and when she returns, her demeanor changes. She'll slip into a kind of trance mid-conversation, eyes glazed, muttering things that make your skin crawl, but that she immediately dismisses as just the stress. The more you talk, the less you feel grounded. You start hearing things out of place, low static creeping into your phone calls, background voices in recordings that shouldn't be there, names whispered that you've never heard, but suddenly seem tied to your own past. Dreams invade your sleep. A locked cell, a shadowy figure speaking in a language you can almost understand but never fully grasp. You try to tell yourself it's all mental. That stress and fear are rewiring your brain, breaking down your perception of reality. But then you find the journal. It's tucked inside an old book Rosa left behind. A battered leather cover. Pages. Filled with strange looping handwriting that shifts and warps every time you look away and back again. The words are part confession, part warning, part puzzle. The last entry reads, "They are watching through the silence. They feed on what? You forget, trust nothing but the gaps. The gaps. You realize that's what you've been chasing all along. Not answers, not the facts of what happened with Alani and the judge, but the spaces in between, the silences where the real story hides, the memories that never formed properly. The voices that whisper just beneath the surface of your consciousness. When you think you're alone, the story becomes less about what is and more about what can't be told. You start questioning everything, the reliability of your own senses, the nature of memory itself, even the people closest to you. Is Rosa helping you uncover a conspiracy? Or is she a hallucination bred by your own fractured mind? Did the officer really vanish? Or was it your brain's desperate attempt to fill a void? Was Alani Reese a girl or a symbol? A legal genius? Or a ghost conjured by the system's blind spots? And the deeper you go, the heavier the doubt becomes, wrapping around you like a shroud. Because what if the biggest truth of all is that no one will ever really know? That some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved? Except you remember. You remember because you have to, because forgetting might be the real danger. And in the silence, in the static, in the cold spaces between your thoughts, something waits, watching, waiting for you to slip, to forget, to believe. But you won't. Not yet. Not until the next whisper breaks through the dark. And when it does, everything will change again. The day Caleb finally thought he'd cracked it, everything seemed to fall into place with an eerie precision that almost felt scripted, too neat, too exact for something so tangled. The courthouse archives, long buried beneath dust and bureaucracy, yielded a file stamped with the kind of official secrecy that makes you wonder why anyone ever bothered to hide it in the first place. In the dim light of his cluttered apartment, Caleb spread out faded documents, witness statements, and transcripts that seemed to confirm what his gut had been whispering all along. Alani Reese wasn't just a legal prodigy, or a girl caught in a surreal courtroom drama. She was the key to something far bigger, something the system had buried like a cancer it hoped would never resurface. The file chronicled a case eerily parallel to Alani's, a 17-year-old girl named Maya Collins, who vanished from the same courthouse decades earlier during a trial that involved a man locked away in the infamous Cell 6. Maya's disappearance had been ruled a tragic mystery, a cold case quietly swept under the rug by officials too eager to move on. But the parallels were undeniable. Both girls, same courtroom, whispers of a sealed cell, judges who lost control, and witnesses who swore they heard voices no one else could catch. It was the kind of hidden truth that felt like a jigsaw piece, clicked snugly into place after years of being forced to fit somewhere else. For a moment, Caleb let himself believe. He mapped out the story, connected the dots, traced the outline of a conspiracy that spanned generations. It wasn't just a coincidence or hallucination. It was a repeating pattern, a trauma echoing through time, like a glitch in the fabric of reality. He even found a faded audio recording from the original trial, Maya's voice, trembling but defiant, whispering a name no one else dared speak. It matched Alani's words perfectly. The discovery ignited a desperate hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment the mystery would finally unravel, the darkness finally be exposed. Caleb called Rosa, breathless and urgent, ready to share the breakthrough, ready to shake the foundation of everything they thought they knew. But as Rosa listened, a shadow crossed her face. She reached into her coat pocket, pulling out an old, battered cassette tape, the same recording Caleb had just found, but worn and distorted in a way that made it almost unrecognizable. "I found this years ago," she said quietly, voice trembling. "But something's off. Listen closely." They played it together. At first, it was the familiar crackle of static, Maya's voice faint but present. Then, beneath the words, came a second layer, a faint, low hum, a rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat. And then the whispering began, unintelligible, but undeniably there. Something was lurking beneath the surface, something alive. The kind of sound you don't hear with your ears but feel in your bones. Caleb's skin prickled. It was a memory glitch, a buried trauma clawing its way back. He remembered the nights as a child, restless and sweating, haunted by a voice that called him by name, a voice that no one else ever heard. He'd pushed it away, convinced it was a dream or a nightmare. But now, the past and present collided. with terrifying clarity. The unease deepened as Rosa shared a story she'd never told before, a memory she'd tried to forget, a glimpse of a shadowy figure standing at the edge of her childhood home, watching silently as the world blurred around her. She didn't know what it wanted, only that it had been waiting, patient and unyielding for decades. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about two girls or a sealed cell or a corrupted judge. Something deeper had been, watching from the beginning, threading itself through their lives with quiet menace. It wasn't a person. It wasn't a place. It was something else, an invisible weight pressing down on their memories, distorting reality until the line between sanity and madness became impossible to trace. Then, the final, devastating twist. As Caleb flipped through the files one last time, his eyes caught a detail that shattered the fragile illusion of resolution. Date carved into the margin of a witness statement, scrawled in shaky handwriting. The date wasn't from decades ago. It was last week. The girl in the statement wasn't Maya. It wasn't Alani. It was someone else entirely. Someone who had been in that courtroom yesterday. Someone who should never have been there. And suddenly, everything they'd seen, heard, and believed unraveled in an instant. The mystery wasn't behind them. It was unfolding, right now, in ways no one was ready to face. You thought you were watching the story of a legal genius fighting for truth, but maybe the truth was never theirs to hold. Maybe you've been living this mystery all along, and now, it's staring back at you. Caleb thought he was alone in the dark, wrestling with fractured memories and truths that bent like broken glass. But the deeper he dug, the clearer it became that he was far from the only one trapped in this labyrinth of shadows. Somewhere, just beyond the veil of normalcy, others were awake too, others who had felt the same creeping unease, who had glimpsed the outlines of this mystery in the static between reality and dream. They had been silently watching, waiting, and sending signals that only those who dared to look closely could decipher. It started with strange symbols appearing in the corners of his vision, glitches in the world that shouldn't have been there, faint, cryptic patterns that blinked out just as he tried to focus on them. Then came the messages, fragments of text on his phone screen when there was no notification, emails that disappeared before he could open them, words scribbled in margins of old books that weren't his. He wasn't losing his mind. He was being communicated with. The question was, by whom? The dreams followed too, vivid and unsettling. A shared space that felt less like sleep and more like a secret meeting ground. In those dreams, he saw faces not his own but achingly familiar, eyes that reflected the same confusion and fear he carried. They spoke in riddles, warnings cloaked in metaphor, their voices echoing with the weight of someone who knew what the government never released. A nameless force watched, they said, feeding on memory glitches and the gaps in what society was willing to admit. And then, there was the observer. Neither friend nor foe, this figure emerged from the shadows of the story like a broken shard of truth. The observer's perspective was disquietingly clear, untouched by the haze that clouded Caleb and Rosa's understanding. Their words arrived in intercepted transmissions, brief bursts of static-laced radio signals that no one could trace but everyone could hear if they listened closely enough. They spoke without revealing their name, their face, or even their motives, only fragments of what was real, warnings stitched into cryptic phrases like, "You were right all along," and "The past is only a reflection of the forgotten." As these voices layered over one another, voices from found footage 20 years ago, whispered confessions smuggled out of locked rooms, and digital traces erased from official records, the very concept of identity began to unravel. Who was Caleb? If his memories could be rewritten, his perceptions manipulated? Was Rosa really a companion on the path to truth, or another projection of the force that tangled their minds? And what of the observer, who might be the last true witness or the ultimate deceiver? The lines between reality and fabrication blurred, until there was nothing left but a tangled web of half-truths, silences, and shadows. Control seemed less like a force exercised by powerful institutions and more like a living, breathing entity that whispered in the corners of the mind, erasing and rewriting what one thought they knew about themselves and the world. You, the watcher, become part of this conspiracy, complicit by the very act of witnessing, chosen because you see what others refuse to acknowledge. Every symbol decoded, every hidden message uncovered, every fleeting dream remembered pulls you deeper into the fold, as if the story is no longer just theirs but yours. And as the observer's final transmission crackles through the static, single phrase lingers in the air, charged and unresolved. The eyes that see the unseen must decide. Will you remember, or will you forget to stay safe? The question hangs, heavy and unanswered, as the screen fades to black and the silence grows louder than ever before. Caleb sat alone in the quiet hum of his apartment, the weight of everything pressing down like the heavy silence before a storm. The flicker of a street lamp outside cast long shadows through the blinds, slicing through the darkness like shards of a shattered mirror. This wasn't just about a courtroom drama anymore. Wasn't about missing girls or mysterious voices caught on cracked audio tapes. It was something far more raw, far more fragile, the fragile thread of what it meant to be human, when everything you thought defined you began to unravel. He had chased answers for so long, tearing apart the fabric of memory and reality, trying to expose a hidden force that manipulated lives in shadows. But now, staring at the tangle of truths and lies, he saw a deeper question emerge, one that no file or recording could ever answer. Why did this happen? Why was this darkness so persistent, so intimate, creeping not just into the world but into the core of their being? It wasn't the mystery that threatened him. It was the meaning behind it. The idea that beneath all the memories, beneath all the faces and names, there might be something more terrifying, a fundamental loss of self, a soul worn thin by secrets, fears, and silence. Caleb's mind trembled at the possibility that the force they'd been fighting wasn't external, but internal, a reflection of every fractured memory, every unspoken trauma, every lie told to survive. And then Rosa's voice broke through the suffocating quiet, softer than ever, trembling with something like regret. "I didn't tell you everything," she confessed, voice breaking in the dim light. "I wanted to protect you. I wanted to protect myself, but maybe we're not meant to protect anything anymore. Maybe the truth, no matter how painful, is the only way we stay whole." The vulnerability in her words shattered something. Caleb. It wasn't just about uncovering what had happened in that courtroom, or the cryptic messages sent between broken minds. It was about facing the part of themselves they'd long buried, the fear of losing who they were, the ache of realizing that identity is as fragile as memory itself. He thought about the dreams, the whispers, the strange symbols blinking just out of sight. Were they warnings, or calls to wake up from a dream they didn't know they were trapped in? The idea of waking became both terrifying and hopeful. What if the truth could save him, even if it meant tearing down everything he believed? What if ignoring it meant living a lie so deep it slowly swallowed his soul? In that moment, the line between destruction and salvation blurred into one. Caleb realized that choosing to confront the darkness, to embrace the painful unknown, was the most human thing he could do, even if it meant losing himself to find himself again. As the first light of dawn crept across the city skyline, Caleb's breath caught in his throat. The mystery wasn't over. It was just beginning, less an ending and more a terrifying awakening that would echo through everything he thought he knew about life, memory, and the fragile beauty of being human. And somewhere, just beyond the edge of understanding, the quiet voice of the observer whispered again, weaving into the dawn's first light with a haunting grace. "In the fragments of what we lose, we find the truth we never dared to seek." Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.